World War II was a global conflict that lasted from 1939 to 1945, involving the majority of the world's nations, including all of the great powers, organized into two opposing military alliances, the Allies and the Axis. The war was sparked by the aggressive expansion of Nazi Germany under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, who sought to conquer Europe and establish a new order based on racial supremacy. The war officially began on September 1, 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland, prompting France and Britain to declare war on Germany. The initial phase of the war was marked by rapid German advances across Europe, as they conquered Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and France. In 1941, Germany turned its attention to the Soviet Union, launching a massive invasion that quickly seized large parts of the country. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, Japan was expanding its empire, conquering much of East Asia and the Pacific Islands. In December 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, drawing the U.S. into the war. The U.S. quickly mobilized its resources, and over the course of the war, became a major contributor to the Allied war effort. The war took a heavy toll on civilians and soldiers alike, with an estimated 70 million fatalities, making it the deadliest conflict in human history. The war was characterized by brutal fighting, especially on the Eastern Front, where Soviet and German forces engaged in some of the bloodiest battles of the war, including the Battle of Stalingrad and the Siege of Leningrad. The turning point of the war came in 1942–1943, with a series of key Allied victories, including the Battle of Midway in the Pacific, the Battle of El Alamein in North Africa, and the Soviet victory at Stalingrad. These victories marked the beginning of the Allied counteroffensive, which gradually pushed the Axis powers back across Europe and Asia. In 1944, the Allies launched a massive invasion of Nazi-occupied France, known as D-Day. The invasion was successful, and the Allies gradually advanced across Europe, liberating France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and pushing into Germany itself. In the Pacific, the Allies launched a series of island-hopping campaigns, gradually pushing back the Japanese forces. The Axis powers, led by Germany, Italy, and Japan, sought to expand their empires through military conquest, while the Allied powers, led by the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union, sought to defend themselves against aggression and preserve their way of life. The war was characterized by devastating military campaigns, such as the Battle of Stalingrad, the Battle of Midway, and the Normandy landings. Millions of people were killed or injured during the conflict, both military personnel and civilians, with estimates of the total death toll ranging from 50 to 85 million. The war was fought on several fronts, including Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. In Europe, the war began with Germany's blitzkrieg tactics, which involved lightning-fast attacks using armored vehicles and aircraft. These tactics proved successful in the early stages of the war, as Germany quickly conquered much of Europe. In the East, Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, starting the largest land campaign in history. The Battle of Stalingrad, which began in August 1942, was a turning point in the Eastern Front, with the Soviet Union emerging victorious after months of brutal urban warfare. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad marked the first major defeat for the Axis powers, and led to a shift in the tide of the war. In the Pacific, Japan launched a surprise attack on the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, on December 7, 1941. This attack drew the United States into the war, and marked the beginning of a long and brutal campaign in the Pacific. The war in the Pacific was characterized by amphibious assaults and island hopping, as the Allies gradually pushed back against Japanese forces. As the war dragged on, the Allies began to gain the upper hand. In Europe, the Allies launched the Normandy landings on June 6, 1944, which allowed them to establish a foothold in France and begin pushing back against the German army. In the East, the Soviet Union launched a series of successful offensives that pushed German forces back across the continent. By 1945, the Axis powers were on the brink of defeat. The United States dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of that year, leading to Japan's surrender and the end of the war. The war had far-reaching consequences, including the establishment of the United Nations, the division of Germany into East and West, and the beginning of the Cold War. The war also had significant social and political consequences. The Holocaust, in which Nazi Germany systematically murdered 6 million Jews, remains one of the most horrific events in human history. The war also led to significant advancements in technology and medicine, including the development of radar, jet engines, and antibiotics. The war finally ended on September 2, 1945, when Japan formally surrendered after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the United States. The war had far-reaching consequences, leading to the formation of the United Nations, the establishment of the U.S. and Soviet superpowers, and the beginning of the Cold War. It also led to significant social and political changes in many countries, including the civil rights movement in the U.S. and the decolonization of many African and Asian countries. In conclusion, World War II was a devastating conflict that shaped the course of modern history. The war was characterized by brutal fighting, massive casualties, and the mobilization of resources on an unprecedented scale. However, it also led to significant advances in technology, medicine, and social progress, and remains a defining moment in the history of the 20th century.